Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the Town of Somers Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is December 20th, 2022. Denise, would you please take the roll?
Ms. DiPolito?
Here.
Mr. Gio?
Here.
Mr. Harding?
Here.
Mr. Lansky?
Here.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Chairman Knistra?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I'd request everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to go right into our agenda this evening. First item on the agenda is 39 Cypress Lane LLC. This is an application for a variance to raise the perimeter grade of a dwelling to make it conforming in height in an R10 residential district at 52 Lakeway Purdy's. Sir, could you just give us your name and
Yes.
your position in representing the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Michael Surignano. I'm an attorney in Cross River, New York. And I'm here tonight with my clients, Juan Serrano, who is the owner-builder. And Juan is building this home for my other client, Anthony Marianello, and his family to move into once it's completed. I would note that the chairman described this as a variance. It is a variance, but there's a first part. That's the second part. The first part is we've asked your board to interpret your code and make a determination whether you agree or disagree with the original interpretation made by Mr. Tuma. So let me just give you a brief history here. Juan obviously employed architects who prepared drawings to do a renovation to this structure, to this home, which is a two-bedroom home, and when we're done, it'll be a two-bedroom home, so we're not increasing the bedroom count. And the architect designed plans to add a second story to it. And those plans were submitted to the building department, and there was some back and forth, but ultimately the building department issued a building permit, and Juan commenced construction. He took off the old roof, and he framed out the new second-story addition, a crawl space attic area, and then framed the beams, the structural beams for the new roof, and then started to close everything in. At that point, a neighbor across the street was contacting the building department, and Tom looked into it and issued a stop work order. And Juan immediately stopped work at that point. And I want to show you the existing condition. By the way, I was hoping tonight to win the prize for best Christmas tie, but obviously I'm going to lose that one.
You can ask for a variance.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so once this,
I'm sorry, the photos we're looking at, this is when the stop order was issued and all construction ceased.
and it's what it looks like today. It's not.
This is what it looks like today also.
Yeah, it's not particularly attractive. It's an unfinished building, and we want to get it finished and finish landscaping and adding some screening along the road, et cetera, but I'll come to that. So once the stop work order was issued, as I said, Juan stopped working on it, and the architects got back involved, and there was much back and forth. At least 4 or 5 different sets of drawings were submitted to the building department in response to their requests for additional information about the grade, the average grade, et cetera, and the way to calculate the roof height. Finally, a submission was made on 9/27/2002, which the building department found conforms to your code requirements. And I'll read the letter that we've appealed from. It's dated October 11th, 2022. To whom it may concern, it's signed by Mr. Tuma. Please be advised that your submission dated 9/27/2022 is hereby denied. The building height shown on the plans conforms to code requirements. However, it is not within the intent of zoning to raise the perimeter grade of a dwelling to make it conforming in height. Respectfully, Thomas J. Tuma, Jr. So in the first instance, we disagree with that opinion, and I'll state the reasons in a minute, but in the short version is that the code sections relied upon by Mr. Tuma are perfectly clear that the measurement of the height of a building is from the finished grade, not from the natural pre-construction grade. And so while Mr. Tuma confirms that our plans that are in front of you now are conforming, he's saying that by backfilling, that's not really the intent of the ordinance. As I gave you a very lengthy letter dated November 9, where I go through each and every code section, both local, Somers Code, and the residential code of New York State, the state code. And the local code definition, 170-3, defines a story. And it says a basement shall be counted as a story if its ceiling is no more than 5 feet above the average elevation of the ground adjacent thereto. My reading of that is the finished grade, otherwise it would make no sense. Then section R202 defines story under the state code and grade, and the grade definition is the finished ground level. I'm quoting, the finished ground level adjoining the building at all exterior walls. That's what a grade is. It's the finished ground level. And then section R202 defines grade plane as, quote, a reference plane representing the average of the finished ground level adjoining the building at all exterior walls. And then section R202, definition of story above grade plane. Subsection 2 says that a story having its finished floor surface entirely above a grade plane, or in which the finished surface of the floor next above is any of the following. Subsection 2 is more than 6 feet above the finished ground level for more than 50% of the total building perimeter. And subsection 3 is more than 12 feet above the finished ground level at any point. So I think the intent of both the local and state statutes make it clear that it's the finished level. And Mr. Toom has confirmed that the finished level on these plans is conforming. His concern is, his reservation is that he doesn't think that's what the town board intended, but I think it's clear from the language of the ordinances that it's the finished ground level. Now, under the Somers Code, the word finished ground level cannot be found. It's not in your code by way of definition. But you do have a section, a general catch-all section under your definitional provisions that say, where the terms are not defined, such terms shall have ordinarily accepted meanings, such as the context implies. And then under section 170-2, definition of word usage, it says, except where specifically defined herein, all words in this chapter shall carry their customary meanings. So what is finished ground level? What's the customary meaning? Well, if you look to the dictionary, Merriam-Webster is one example. It's defined as entirely done, brought to a completed state. So it's our position that unlike the natural grade, which is the elevation of undisturbed natural surface before construction, the ordinarily accepted and/or customary meaning of the term finished ground level can only refer to the elevation of the finished, the post-construction level of the ground adjoining the building. So we think that Mr. Tuma we disagree with Mr. Toomer's trying to get behind the clear language of the ordinance and the clear language of the state code to render an opinion that he doesn't believe that that's the intent, but clearly it is. And I would note that because zoning laws restrict the use of one's property rights as necessarily a consequence of all zoning, the courts have said, because of constitutional protections, the courts have said if there's any ambiguity, the dispute or the difference of opinion has to be found in favor of the property owner because it's his rights that are being infringed upon. It's kind of like in baseball, the tie goes to the runner at first. If the ball and the runner get to first base at the same time, the ump calls it fair, calls the runner safe. And it's a similar situation under zoning. So the other point I want to make before I move on to the variance part, and maybe we could discuss this first part first and I can answer any questions, is that we're not importing any soil onto this site. The soil that will be used to backfill against the foundation and to finish off and level off the grade around the foundation, as shown on these plans that are conforming, that dirt is there. It's not being imported. It was set aside and stockpiled, and it's going to be reused. The town engineer here in Somers has also looked at our plans to backfill, and we have an indication that from an engineering point of view, it's structurally safe and sound to do what we're doing. The foundation walls will not have inordinate amount of back pressure against them, and so that the issue here is really a matter of whether the intent of the ordinance was for natural grade to be the measuring level, or finished grade to be the measuring level for the height of a building. What I have here is A007.00, and it shows the elevations of the, can you all see that? I hope. But this is the front elevation. There's going to be steps up to it. There's a first, the basement, it hasn't changed. It's an unfinished, basement with a laundry room, and then the bedrooms and the living space is going to be on the first and second floor. There's a crawl space attic. The roof is higher than the old roof was. Obviously, we added a second story. It also has a small crawl attic space. But the height of the roof really is a function of aesthetics. It's to the architect wanted to give the house a nice sloped roof, and so that's where we are. So our first point one is we don't believe that that we even need a variance, because zoning boards in New York State can entertain an appeal for an interpretation. And that's what we're asking in the first instance here tonight, for you to interpret the code sections and declare for the world to hear whether a building height is to be measured from the finished grade up to the peak of the roof, or from the original natural pre-construction grade. And we believe that clearly it's according to the clear language of the statute and the constitutional presumptions in favor of a property owner, that it is the finished grade that is the measuring point. And if you agree with us, we don't need a variance. If you don't agree with my legal opinion, it wouldn't be the first time that a zoning board disagreed with me. And if that's your thinking, then we're asking for a variance to allow this house to be completed, to have the stop work order, so that the stop work order can be lifted and the house can be completed and made to look beautiful, and the yard and the landscaping and the screening along the road to be implemented. And it's basically a 5-foot variance if you measure from the pre-construction natural grade. And obviously to tear off this roof And by the way, the second floor interior ceiling height is standard 8 feet. So if we had to tear off this roof and redesign it, it would have much less slope to it, and really it'd be an enormous expense for my clients, and really it wouldn't make any material difference to the neighborhood. We believe that the house, when it's finished, will be an addition to the neighborhood, will be a positive addition. It'll be well in character with the rest. Once the grading is properly done and finished and landscaped, the house will not be a detriment to the neighborhood or neighboring properties. We know from the engineer that there's no adverse structural or environmental negative impacts. And there's no other way to accomplish this as a practical matter other than a very expensive ripping off of the entire structure above the 8-foot ceiling of the second floor, and that really doesn't seem justified. And in terms of whether this was some kind of a self-imposed difficulty, a building permit was issued, construction was done pursuant to the then drawings. We didn't change and build something that wasn't shown on the drawings. So I don't think we can be charged with, Juan can be charged with doing something that he shouldn't have done. He had a building permit for a set of plans, and he framed the renovation structure according to those plans. When a stop work order was issued, he absolutely adhered to it, and the shovels stopped at that moment. The hammers were put down. And so we're here tonight to ask for your interpretation. Do you measure from the finished grade of this and every other house in town that's undergoing renovations or construction, or from the original level? If you find that it's the original level, which I think is contrary to the clear statutory language, then we ask for a 5-foot variance. I'm happy to answer any questions the board has. If you have any factual issues or...
Yeah, one question I had right off the bat. So can I interpret that from the natural grade to the finished grade was about 5 feet of additional 5 to 6 feet added?
No, because the roof is higher. The roof is about I think it's about 3 feet higher than the old roof.
Yeah,
because
so
of the pitch.
I'm trying to feel how much has the grade been increased above the natural
Okay.
level?
There's going to be 95.27 cubic yards of dirt that's on site, not imported, that'll be spread around the foundation. And it's not just, within 2 feet of the foundation. It's a good 10 to 15 feet in all directions, and then it slopes down gradually and/or is supported by a retaining wall. The original plan did have a retaining wall, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think I've got an answer to the question, though. How much is the new grade above the natural grade? How much has it been increased?
Well, the front elevation, 2.9 feet, and the rear elevation is 5 feet. So I'm asking for the variance for the highest part, which is in the rear, which nobody sees. In the front elevation, we're 2.9 feet. We would need only a 2.9-foot variance.
Yeah, that's the variance requested, okay.
All right.
Maybe we'll talk to the builder also and just find out how much the property was raised.
Yep, come on up. Juan, Juan,
sir.
Juan, you got to come here.
Yeah, you got to go to the microphone. Please give us your name, sir.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juan Serrano. I'm the owner.
Okay.
My lawyer, he didn't show the back of the building. It's already high. I can show you guys the back where it shows the deck.
The upper left-hand corner one, yeah. You have to stay with the microphone, sir.
Here. Go ahead.
Or take the microphone off the stand.
The back part where is the deck is already high. So from here to the level of the first floor, I have like about 2 feet, 1 inch.
So how many feet did you add to the natural grade to the finished grade? I'm trying to determine how much approximately I'm assuming if you're looking for a 5-foot
I don't
variance,
think he's added it yet, right? He
We
plans
didn't.
to add it, assuming it's approved.
I'm just showing you how is the existing grade now. That's the existing grade. We didn't add anything
so
yet.
the intent is to add it to be in compliance. Is that what
Yes.
you're doing?
Yes, the intent is to add. I'm just showing you guys the back of the building is already the way it's supposed to be, but the front looks high because was a walking door to the basement.
How many feet will you add to the property?
We look in the ad wherever shows the drawings. The complaint is, I guess, to add 3 feet high, so we gotta go like 3 feet from here. The back of the the back of the building is already high.
Okay.
So it's really adding the fill to the front of the building.
Well, fill is going to be added to all sides, as shown on the plans. And again, the building department has found that these plans, with our proposed finished grade shown, comply with the height. We don't need a variance if you agree that with me, that measurements should be from the finished grade, not the original grade. The chairman wants a simple answer. I don't have it. Unfortunately, the architect isn't available. You want to know how much is the old grade being raised to the finished grade,
right.
at the greatest point, wherever that is.
It's on the
It
second page of the plan.
varies also.
I'm sorry, what was that,
It
Tom?
varies with each elevation.
Right, how much they're gonna add?
Yeah.
He's got an existing and a proposed on the second page of the plans.
All right.
I would like to make a comment if I could. Your letter and your presentation, I think, conflates a couple things. So this board, of course, interprets the zoning code, and you're adding state definitions, which we have no say or interpretation of. Of course, that would be if you had a query with Mr. Tuma's interpretation of a building code, you would go to the state. Your question, of course, is an interpretation of the zoning code, and you're kind of putting them next to each other, I guess, for purposes of to show the similarities, but it doesn't. I don't think that's the purpose here, right? We're not trying to interpret the state code. We're just trying to interpret the zoning.
Well, I referenced the state code because Mr. Tuma studied the state codes, referenced the state codes when he rendered his opinion. He didn't just look at the town. I agree with you. You can't vary state code. The reason it's in my letter is because we're appealing the building inspector's interpretation that this was not the intent. And when he reached that, in reaching that, I should say, he also reviewed the state code sections that I've quoted.
The state code gets changed every 2 years, and our zoning code is mostly from the 60s. Doesn't seem like a reasonable.
Well, the state code sections about finished grade hasn't changed in anybody's memory, but I understand your point, and I'm not asking you for a variance of state code. I know you don't have that authority.
Okay, it just seems. I understand.
I'd like to ask, where did all the dirt come from? There must have been a considerable amount of dirt added to the finished line in order to raise the finished line as much as you did.
Well, nothing has been raised yet. The 95 cubic yards are stockpiled on the site, and once we get through this process and we can proceed with construction, that will be spread around according to this plan and reviewed by the town engineer. It's 95 cubic yards. You want to know where that
Yeah, so
soil came
that
from?
was imported?
No, it was not imported.
Yeah, I got a question here.
Yes.
I have quite a few questions, as a matter of fact. Now, this house was built on the original footprint,
Yes.
so where did the dirt come from?
Juan, come on up. They want to know where the 95 cubic yards come.
The dirt has been in the lot for I don't know how long. It's 2 piles of soil in there with a stone atlara in there. The trees and everything growing up around. So I can bring the pictures, or if you look the drawings, shows in the drawing where is the piles of the dirt.
So in other words, you bought this house
Like that.
with the soil on the property?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything was the way it is. I just did a roof.
All right.
All
That
right.
answers my question. Now, Tommy, I got a question for you. When we're talking new construction, finished grade is determined how? In the sense of, all right, you bring the material up, right? You do your finished grade, and then you measure from the finished grade up to the roof. Now, this was a major renovation. If I'm understanding you, your denial is off of the finished grade of the previous structure, correct?
Yes.
So, on a normal renovation of this magnitude, do you still shoot it off of the original finished grade from the previous, before the renovation took place?
Yes.
But how can you determine that, Tom? I mean, because
It's shown on the design drawings that are submitted for a permit.
but some of that permit is probably many years old, right?
This permit here,
It must go back to the beginning of the original piece of opportunity, I mean, piece of construction.
yeah, there's not even information like that in the House file. The permit issuance was based on the proposed drawing that was submitted for permit,
So he's saying,
showing the grades.
So then what
Which were not,
changed?
the grades were not represented correctly on the drawing.
So then it falls under the architect who drew the plans.
Yes. And when that was brought to my attention, I verified in person, and the grade represented on the drawing was not the actual grade, which subsequent, was reasons for issuing a stop work order until that issue was resolved.
If they had represented the proper grade on the plans as submitted to you,
The,
would you have not issued the permit for a second story?
yes, if the actual grade that was at the site was shown on that drawing, there would have been an issue.
You would not have issued, you would not
Correct.
have issued a permit for a second floor, or you would have made them
Correct.
change the
I would
roof
not
line?
have issued a building permit
So for
this design.
for all renovations of this type, you're never measuring from the finished grade.
All-
You're always looking at the prior
Existing
grade that existed
existing
before the
grade.
construction.
Yes, which goes back to an earlier question about new construction. The grading is all determined in the engineering process, which usually goes to planning board, and is a review of that process. So, and it's also overseen by that office. The grading with new construction. With existing, this proposal was for a second-story addition only,
Right.
not for a second-story addition with grade changes, et cetera.
So we're not really talking about the difference between natural grade and finished grade. We're just talking about the difference between pre-construction finished grade and after construction finished grade.
but to be fair, the code is indifferent to whether it's renovation or new construction. And so when you build a new house and it shows finished grade and you determine the roof on that plan and it goes to planning board, there is no different zoning code, nothing else being interpreted on that set of documents versus on a renovation where you're drawing a distinction. And we're only looking at the one code. And so to change this and invalidate it in this instance, it calls into question every planning approval which was done, because it's the same interpretation. And 70% of the houses built here are all built off of a finished grade with a height calculated at that.
New construction, you're referring
New construction.
But then it goes to the planning.
Yes, but
It's like this would skip that.
This
But the point is-
application wasn't referred to planning
Exactly.
because there was no proposed.
But there was no
grade change.
different code. There's no distinction in this code vis-à-vis new construction, something referred to planning, and a renovation. And so I understand the thought process, but we have the same code that they have, So you build a house and you change the grade, it's the same thing with a renovation. Finished grade is finished grade. At any time, in my interpretation of the zoning code, in this town and in the other towns which I've worked in, people can add soil and change the grade. And if they're now checking finished grade from that soil and they're going for an approval at that point in time, that's how it works. I've never seen a distinction, and I don't see it in our code.
So would that indicate that any time that I wanted to build higher than allowed, let's say I want to be able to see over my neighbor's house because there's a nice view behind that house.
Yeah.
So I want to build above what's allowed. So if I just get enough dirt,
There's a question of retaining, of course, and so.
well, right, but
you're only allowed to
assuming
do-
like in this case, I could do that without retaining, if I can if I can put 3 feet of dirt around the house, I can raise the house 3 feet.
Under that argument.
So that's, I think,
Yes.
I mean, so it makes sense to me why it would be questioned and why an
Sure, sure, sure.
interpretation might go that way.
Sure, but that has been, in my understanding, the standard in the majority of our municipalities, and you get into only allowed to retain so much soil before you need a building permit, before you trigger other things, or before you end up going to planning. And so there is a threshold where it does become ridiculous, and you can't necessarily do it. But a couple of feet, I see that everywhere all the time.
I mean, well, you know, I also think of too, like, think about a new developer who's going to go in and put in 50 homes. There's no way he's going to build 50 homes on the existing ground as is. You know that's going to be graded and changed all over.
Sure.
So right away, we have a difference.
But we don't have that difference in our code, and that's the essence of what I'm saying. And
Well,
so,
but I mean,
if it-
but think about a developer that goes in, okay, and the land slopes up and down. Okay,
Heritage
he
shows.
levels it out and puts. How do you know what the original grade was? I mean, obviously they got to get approvals for that.
They submit a topo with a proposed original grade, and
Right.
they show the grade line changes.
And then everything
that's
will be from the finished grade.
That's Tommy's point, is that it's vetted, and in this instance, it wasn't vetted, and so that's where he's drawing a distinction. But I'm saying that there's not two codes, there's not two interpretations we can do, and it's the same process. And unless and until the code is further developed, you do have to go, Ty does have to go to the runner. That is clear law in New York State. So the applicant, if there is ambiguity, they get the benefit of that ambiguity all day long.
So if I could just to confirm a couple of things, which I think will paint a picture. So, and I drove by the house today. So currently, or pre-renovation, the access to this house, the doors were in what is now being called the basement, correct?
There was always a basement, and
But that's the only way into the house.
correct.
And there previously was living space on that level.
No,
No?
it was unfinished.
So
It's an unfinished area. You enter there and you go upstairs.
okay.
Oh,
So I think that starts to paint. But that would be currently the only way into this house is from that level, and on at least two sides, it is at grade, right? The
Correct. Sure.
basement, what is going to be the basement, or is the basement. So what essentially we're putting now two levels of living space above this basement, and essentially burying the basement, right?
No, we're not anywhere near to burying the basement.
We're filling. I think that's the point.
I understand your point.
If there could be a better answer to Dick's original question, which is from current grade, which is the entry to the door, are we putting 1 feet of dirt, 2 feet of dirt, 6 feet of dirt? I think that's going to.
Just on he's putting dirt on the sides, and the roof. It's a mean elevation change, how you measure it.
Well, the sides is the front. I mean, the front is the lowest elevations are the two you can see from the street, I believe.
So, not the front of the house. His dirt's going on the sides of the house.
I believe the front as well. You're going to have to.
The front as well, more so.
Mostly in the front.
Yes.
The finished elevation,
That's good. Okay.
I'm sorry, the finished elevation, according to A-007.00, is 104.80 in the front. And there's now going to be a new staircase leading up to a new entrance on the first floor.
So where there's a current door here,
Yeah,
which will
I
be
get your point.
sealed off, I presume.
So
Filled.
you're not going into the basement anymore?
No, that door is being removed
fair
and
enough.
just windows are going to be on the front of the house in the basement. But in the extreme example, if you backfilled entirely up to the top of the basement level, structurally that doesn't work because then those walls become foundation walls and they weren't built or designed for that. We're nowhere near that extreme, and town engineers looked at this and found that we're okay here. With basically we're talking about the finished ground level sloping to natural ground level over a 10-foot distance on the right side of the house and over a 9-foot distance on the left. So from the finished grade back to natural grade, there's 10 feet distance and a 9-foot distance on the other side of the house.
But there's no, but there's, there's going to be a change where the door was,
The door is proposed to be removed.
so it's going to be a window.
Well, not where the door was,
Or
but
something
there's-
like that.
Yeah, there's going to be windows on the lower level front.
And now there will be
Correct.
steps up to that.
New
Correct.
door,
Right.
'cause it's gonna be higher.
But the basement floor stays, the slab of the basement floor stays the same on the interior. And you're going to access it now from inside the house, not from outside the house.
Right, it's not a foundation. It's,
I get it.
I think, yeah, go, sorry.
Tom, a question. When you measure the height, is it from 3 feet away from the foundation, 20 feet away from the foundation for the elevation allowance?
It's at the foundation.
At the foundation?
Yes.
Straight at the wall. Yeah.
And it's an averaging process. In other words, we had to show all four sides to Tom, and he made a determination that as designed now, our finished grade makes the house conforming.
So theoretically, you have the foundation, you build a retaining wall a foot away, and you have the height requirement, and everything else is 3 feet lower. Am I understanding that correctly in the sense of?
If a designer wants to put that on a piece of paper for me, I'll consider that in a review.
No, I'm just curious in
Yeah.
the sense of,
I don't know about a foot away. I think you'd
well,
have
I'm
to go
just saying
further than
theoretically,
that.
it can be done that way. Because you're measuring, you just got.
I think there's something with 6 feet away from the
yeah, okay.
foundation wall. That was in the
You're,
code.
you're into building codes at that point in time
Okay.
versus
No,
zoning
I'm
codes.
just curious, how you would measure, how far away from the footing or the foundation to determine the height of a house. That's basically my question.
He already said he measured that at
the
the
foundation, and
at the
that's-
foundation.
That's the finished grade is where it would where the grade would meet the building.
Right, no, I
And
understand
How
that.
that's accomplished, with retaining walls, et cetera, I'd have to further study that. and
Right,
see
no,
if that
I'm
was
just curious of how,
fine with the code.
the distance away from the foundation. That's when it comes down to it.
But my question is there a distinction that you're aware of, Tommy, in the code as between new construction and renovation work, where the code is supposed to interpret any of these things differently?
The only difference is someone comes to me with a proposal for a second-story addition only. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at heights. Doing a zoning review of that. For an existing structure, a new structure already has environmental permits. The contour of the land is pretty much dictated during the planning board review process to collect stormwater, et cetera, and reduce grades of driveways not to exceed a certain percentage. There's a whole lot that goes into it, and that's all taken care of through the planning board.
I guess in a second-story addition, you're assuming there's not a grade change because it's.
There was no proposed grade changes on the original submission that received the building permit.
I think it would be good to hear if the public or neighbors have anything to say. I'm curious to see what that point of view is.
Okay, we can go out to the public now, and then we can come back to both sides here, and we'll hear.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so this is a public hearing, so anybody who wishes to speak in regard to this application, for, against, whatever comments you have, please just come up to the microphone, just give us your name and address, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Would anybody like to speak in regard to this application? Yes. Sir, come on up, sir.
Hi.
If you could just give us your name and address, and if you have something you want to show us, you can put it up on the board there too. We'll take a look at it.
Yeah, well, I'll get to it. My name is Jim Harizny. I live across the street from that property.
Okay.
At 51 Lakeway, Purdy's, New York. I want to thank Tom and his department has been very good at keeping us communicated via the FOIL process once we saw what was being built. We were quite surprised. I also am an architect, by the way, registered for over 30 years, a New York State architect. And I wish the architect was here because a lot of these issues are architectural issues. But anyhow, I want to go through these points very fast and maybe for the benefit of everybody. But this project started with a massive tree cutting in August of 21 with no permits, at least 10 mature trees of 24-inch caliber or at least 12 were cut down right along the street edge, might have been even in the street property, I don't know. And that got our attention. And then when we were watching, that caused us to watch this project even more because we lived right across the street. So I'm not sure if they filed for a permit for that and why they were allowed to do that, but that's a minor issue. The construction started on August 30th, and in barely 2 weeks, they took down what they didn't want on the existing house, and they built on top of that. They didn't pour any new foundations as far as I could see. So the foundations are what they are. We did get a copy of the survey at some point. Survey's from 1928. So those foundations are close to 100 years old. Let's just remember that when we're talking about putting more soil along the foundation. The lower floor of the building is wood studs, I would assume, because it was open to grade. There were doors on all four sides of this house. That's the definition of ground floor. So that was what was there, and that's what they were trying to keep. But then they accepted Tom's stop work order because they knew they were wrong, because they were adding a floor on top of that. This is probably going to fall down. This is what the house used to be. 2 stories, and in the back there was a dormer, so it was a 2.5-story house. This is what was built. Clearly 3 stories. This story had entries on all 4 sides. 1 story, 2 story, 3 story. We're talking about stories here. Elevations is a detail. And I don't know about this first space. I've never seen this first space in the building code or in the law.
Please speak into the microphone, sir, just so everybody can hear.
There's no exception on first base. Like, in other words, build it as fast as possible and then you can get away with it because you got there first. No, this is a 3-story building. And we pointed that out also to Tom. And they did obey the stop work order on September 13th, and they stopped for over a year. So in my mind, that almost implied they knew they were guilty because now their building permit totally expired. They could have tried to appeal during that time, but they waited a full year. Building permit expired, and then comes December and we get a variance letter. Peculiar that they waited so long. By the way, there's no secret 100 cubic yards of soil on this site. We live right across the street from there. They would have to scrape the soil on all sides to get 100 cubic yards, and the septic is in the front, and so is the well. So they're going to disturb all their services and possibly damage them in the process. By the way, I'm not against new construction. I'm an architect. There's good solutions and there's bad solutions. This is not a good solution. There could have been a very decent house, and Lake Purdy's has many decent additions and renovations over the years. But a lot of information was misrepresented in the drawings, and they're very confusing drawings. Life safety codes, I know it's not your department, but I feel as if, as an architect, there's a lot ignoring of the fact that an entire floor of live load was put on top of existing construction. What consideration was done on those foundations that are 100 years old? I wonder if this was done if this was correctly shown from the beginning, there would have been some serious study of those foundations. The applicant's attorney refers to the town engineer's approvals. We have no record of them. We FOILed, requested many times. We don't understand how the town engineer, who, as far as I understand, is not a registered engineer, is approving those foundations. They're existing. So they haven't modified 100-year-old foundations, and they're adding extra floor of live load. Also, they're adding a deck on the back, which is also going to lean against those existing foundations. So this is a life safety nightmare, not to mention the environmental grading problems of scraping up the soil and exposing their septic. And by the way, this is a culvert. This is the town of Somers culvert. It ties into the Muscoot or Croton River Reservoir that we're concerned about the pollution going into. If they start messing with their septic field and damaging it, it's going to drain into the environment. So there should have been a site plan review process here. The grading is not really accurately shown. The survey's from 1928. It was restamped recently by another surveyor claiming that it's still accurate, but as far as I can tell from looking at it, it's not accurate at all. I also question how a fire department's going to get around this building. There's a steep driveway. It goes up about 12 or 14 feet. There's no access on the other side, so they're building a deck on the other side. They added a whole floor. How are you going to fight a fire here? Did anyone ever ask the fire department? We have a volunteer fire department. They have to truck in water. They have to go to Lake Purdy's, pump out the water, and drive up the steep driveway, no maneuverability, and the house plans themselves show that all the bedrooms are going to be on the top floor. How many people could be living up there? I mean, there could be many brothers and sisters and family and friends. And not to mention the deck. How many decks have collapsed in New York State over the last 10 years because of poor design? They're going to lean the deck against the old foundations. So life safety is a nightmare in this project. Now, the environmental removing soil, they're going to bring in soil, so then who knows where the soil came from? I mean, so this needs site plan review, in my mind. It does not need a variance. I mean, it should be disallowed. So, to allow this third story to be added will set a bad precedent for Lake Purdy's. This will have, everybody's going to want to add another floor. Why not? You can get away with it. That would be spot zoning, which is illegal in the New York State Constitution for zoning. Spot zoning is explicitly pointed out as not being allowed. So you can't approve a project and not have repercussions, or you're going to have everybody wanting to do the same. And sure, it's going to increase everybody's property values, but then you're going to have everybody adding another floor and just getting some soil. Maybe they'll start trucking in the soil today when they hear, you know, if you sneak the soil in early, you can raise the grade. And you can, maybe I should start doing that, putting the 3-foot mounds along the sides of my house so I can get the average grade up. I mean, what kind of precedent is this going to set? The zoning officer has the say on these interpretations, and I agree with his rejection of this project.
Do you have a solution, sir, for this, this issue?
There's many good design solutions. They could expand, they would have to refile, go through the site plan approval process, but expand the footprint of the house. There's enough site. You can expand the house to the back. It's just sure, it's going to cost more to put a new foundation in the back. They could have a basement in the back of the house, and then, in other words, this floor disappears, or you put a dormer and you expand the house to the back. The site is big enough.
So it's your request that the second floor be removed?
I don't think it's my role to.
Well, we're looking for what you're proposing. You're an architect. What would you propose as a resolution to this?
Yeah, the top floor has to come down. That was illegal.
That was
That's illegal.
Okay, that's what you're proposing. Okay, I just wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
What you wanted to do.
So I have lots of backup information if.
I didn't hear anything with regard to the interpretation of grade or the height of the building. I heard you a lot of other things. But
Well, when you file documents, you look at the survey, and when the survey shows that the existing floor is at the same floor that you're entering at, it's, in other words, that's the definition of the first floor, period. You don't, you're telling me that because they don't explicitly say that you're not allowed to raise grade, that has to be said in the code? The code is based upon the existing grades. That's what Tom is looking at.
But if it's not based upon existing grades for new houses, why is it based upon existing grades for renovations?
A new house is going to go through site plan approval. If you're going to change the grading, you need a site plan approval. Then you get the environmental review. You make sure the fill comes from a clean place. Who knows where the fill's going to come from now?
I understand all that, but I just don't see two sections of the code. I don't see two definitions. I don't see it separate. I don't think our code works that way. And I understand your concerns. I live in Purdy's myself. I'm probably 1,000 feet from that house.
So,
but that and it's an eyesore. And and of course I can't speak to their foundation as nobody can, but their architect. But at the end of the day, like, we're here interpreting the zoning code, nothing else. None of the rest of the stuff matters.
yeah, I know. Well, you don't give a variance to a project that is spot zoning.
I don't see how it's spot
It's
zoning.
3 stories. It's 3 stories. Look at what's built. They're not changing anything right now. They just want to finish it and they want to raise the grade. And you're telling me they can raise the grade? What about if these are stud walls? They're going to start to cave in. There should have been a site plan approval process.
That's a question for their architect.
I don't think it's.
That's not a question for us. Whether or not the foundation is strong enough to support that load, that's not a question for us.
It's an architectural engineering issue, which is not
Most of
for
your
us.
questions are
Yeah, I know, but I
are
don't
not
think
for
when
us.
there's a question of life safety or there's a question of changing the zoning by making this calling this 3 stories 2 stories.
We don't do life safety on this board, and there's qualified people who do.
Yeah.
I mean, Tommy's first in line to do life safety and to make sure that the New York State Building Code is enforced. Mm-hmm. And there's a licensed architect signing on this thing saying that the foundation's good. We're just looking at interpreting the code.
Okay, well, the definitions, my wife is also has something to say, and she knows a little bit more of the definitions of floors per your code. So I don't know why you would try to find a way to approve a project that's going to change the nature of the neighborhood. Don't you realize that every other property owner then is going to be able to raise a floor on their house by changing the grade? You give me and then the environmental impact of having the drainage changed and possibly septic impacted. I know you're saying you're just zoning, but this is a zoning violation. It's a spot zoning change if you approved it.
Now, if I may say something here, based on what's taking place this evening, I don't think Tommy, our building inspector, with life experiences this evening, I don't think he will allow a permit to be issued without final grades from here on out, from the engineer who designed or the architect that designed the plans. It's granted it's an oversight, but this is a learning experience, I think, for all of us. And again, you brought up some very valid points, but it has nothing to do with zoning. The thing that's in front of us, as Bart mentioned, it is the variance of the height. That's what's really, our decision on this board is the height.
Why not stories?
I'm sorry?
Why not stories? Because stories is also mentioned in the
It
zoning
all comes
code.
down to the height.
But the height is also a variance. I'm saying don't give them the variance because the variance is giving a green light to all these other bad practices that they are
But as I
implementing.
mentioned just a moment ago, everything has to go through a permit, through site plans, and with the experience that we're going through tonight, I don't think Tommy will ever
Yeah, well, Tommy's-
overlook anything like that again.
Tommy did say he did not give them the permit. So that's where we're at. So you're saying Tom has a final say. He said they're not getting a permit, and this person is asking for a variance. I'm saying, don't give them the.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I thank you for your input. I think that this person objects to the granting of the variance
Right.
and agrees with the interpretation, and he shared his opinion on that with
Yes.
us. And I think
I
No,
understand.
I
you're-
understand.
we're not here to argue with
I
you.
understand you're not trying to review the building code, but, giving this project a green light on all this tenuous, you have it in your control on this height issue to make them revise this project to be a better project. This will stop the process. It will go back to Tom. There'll be more negotiations. Maybe there's a site plan review that should be done. There's no magic 100 cubic yards of soil on that site. So you might be allowing unclean fill coming in, by approving the height change. So this is a section that shows what was there, the blue, to what's built. And again, the front stoop has to be raised. You're going to have that type of house all over Lake Purdy's and over Somers if you allow this type of spot zoning to take place. That's my final statement. And here's my wife,
Thank
who's
you.
also an architect, by the way.
Thank you. Can you please give us your name, just for the record, and address?
My name is Mayra Horisnik. I live at 51 Lakeway, across the street, and I'm also an architect, and we've been living in Somers for 37 years, so we've been here for a long time. I just want to clip this to the board because it is some of the zoning issues. Regarding some of the items that were in the letter that the attorney wrote, there were some inconsistencies that we realized because we understand the drawings and we reviewed them. They are raising the roof, not 3'9" like he says, but they're raising it 8'9". So that's something to be considered. And like my husband said, the ground floor is not the basement, it's the first floor. And it has doors in all 4 sides. You probably couldn't see it from the road, but they're there. The back, the side, the front, and the other side where the garage or the workshop used to be. So that is a floor. And I do not know much about the interior because I was never in it, even though other people have been in it. There was a family room. There were some patio doors to a slab facing our neighbor here. And in the back, there's a full bathroom. So this ground floor, yes, it has a laundry and it has a workshop, but half of the ground floor is a ground floor. So then they added the 2 floors above that. There's some there's some things in the definitions. I still couldn't find exactly all the definitions that he's referring to in the code, but in this zoning code, there's some definitions. Every time I found the word ground, it was really the ground before construction, before filling. So when they were referring to the elevation, like when they say that the second story, or the definition of a basement shall be counted as a story if its ceiling is more than 5 feet above the average elevation of the ground adjacent thereto. The ground, in a definition in 93.3 of your zoning code, says existing grade, the elevation of the existing ground surface prior to excavation or filling. And then there were other definitions referring to highest adjacent grade, the highest natural elevation of the ground surface prior to construction. This is from Chapter 102, Flood Damage Prevention. So there were some things in the zoning code, Somers Code, that referred to grade and ground as existing. So I would like to clarify that. There's also an issue when they say that the interpretations of the zoning. I found in the Chapter 74, Building Construction, when there's a conflict, in the event any section of this article conflicts with any other section of a local law, the more restrictive provision or law shall, in all instances, be applicable. So again, we would like it to be the more conservative approach and use the existing grade as the precedent, and then realize that the ground floor is a story and it's not a basement, and that's why the house is so tall now. And again, like my husband mentioned, there's no paperwork or file on the planning department regarding the engineering, that there was an approval, not like he says in the letter, the town engineer approved the design and plans for applicants regrading, but there's no proof of that. The town clerk couldn't find that. So it's, I'm going to go a little bit into the zoning and the master plan, because a few years ago, Somers adopted the revised master plan, and they had two goals in there. And one was the neighborhood, protect the character of the neighborhood. And the lake communities specifically were highlighted in that paper, in that report as being very sensitive. Lake Purdy's has a lot of small lots. It has a lot of little houses, and over the time they've been changing, they've been adding to it. And lately, I mean, some local builder has been doing a lot of renovations, and they're 1.5, 2.5 stories at the most, and they go for $635,000. Unbelievable. Sometimes the basement is tucked in, sometimes it's not. So there's a way to make these houses work and get a lot of money for them, especially when there's only two bedrooms, because that's what they claim they have, even though they have a den that looks like a bedroom because it has a closet, but it doesn't have a door. But anyway, we're not going to go there. So the goal of the master plan, the first one is to preserve the character of the existing residential neighborhoods, which I think this house does not. It's very vertical. It has two third floor projections to make it even more appealing. It looks like a townhouse that you see in Queens or in Albany. It doesn't belong in Lake Purdy's. The proportions are very vertical because they just went up and they didn't expand. So that's one problem that we see. And then the other one, goal of the master plan, is to pursue the best possible environmental quality. And that has to do with drainage, soil, and natural features. And this plan, and what we did in their plan, we try to show in the brown area all the fill that is being added to it. The drawings say that these two piles in the front will allow for 40 cubic yards. They have to import 45 cubic yards to make this work, because they are adding 5 feet in this corner, 5.2 in the other, 2.8 and 3 on the other one. So they're adding all this soil. On the back, it goes 32 feet from the house, beyond all the way 32 feet to the back. That is really in the setback and next to the neighbor. So what's going to happen with that water shedding into their property, all those blue arrows into the front, and then it's going to come down the driveway, which is very steep, it's 12%, and then go into the drainage at the bottom, which really goes to the reservoir. It's only 3 catch basins away from going into the Muscoot or Croton Reservoir. And then you can see in the front, they removed those 10 trees, which are, I mean, it's horrible if you can see that. It's, the biggest one was, I think, close to the house, but they were still like 36 inches, 24 inches, and it looks terrible now. It has been like this for a whole year, and if they had not removed those trees, we wouldn't have seen what they were building in there, but they did. So they have removed trees, they're importing soil, changing the drainage, and changing the natural course of the water around the site, which I don't think is good. So I would like to conclude that Lake Purdy's hamlet is unique in that it has a lot of smaller lots and a lot of topography, therefore making construction challenging. Granting a variance as requested in this meeting will allow for tall additions to be built in our neighborhood. whether it is the height of the roof or the number of stories. This will set a bad precedent for other developers or homeowners to add floors to their houses and therefore ruin the character of the neighborhood and make obsolete the zoning schedule, which requires a 2.5-story height limit. The owner of this house is a developer, I believe, and it's not a typical Lake Purdy's homeowner, so they're going to try to build for the maximum profit. And tell you, if they bring all this soil and have to redo the foundations on the house like they say they will, because the architect said new foundations, how are they going to put new foundations on a house that is already built? Are they going to lift it? Isn't that going to be more expensive than taking the roof down? I think so, but I don't know. We have seen many additions and renovations in our neighborhood done correctly and still affording high real estate price. We're not against new development, we just want it done correctly according to the zoning laws and so that it fits in our neighborhood. So with that, I think I have photos and stuff, but I think that is the point. It doesn't belong in our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else here in the audience wish to speak in regard to this application? Yeah. Sir, just give us your name and address.
Sure. Stephen Movica, 50 Lakeway. I live right next door to the property.
Okay.
And the thing is, like we all know, it's been an eyesore for over a year. Next door to me is a huge pile of chopped up wood, sawdust, very, very high. So our concern is that, it's been there so long, you can have rodents in there, raccoons infested, and who knows what else. So, I'm here because I wanted to know what was the issue. And I'm just hoping a resolution comes about so that all parties involved are happy with the outcome.
So you're looking for the property to get cleaned up. Do you have a problem with the height?
Not really, because I don't see it. It's I'm on the side of it, so.
Are you, sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, go ahead.
Are you before the house as you're coming down the road or after?
Am I for the house? No, well, I wouldn't.
Before, as you're coming down the road, are you before the house or after the?
Oh, before the house.
Before the house. Before the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there other two-story houses or houses of similar height around this house or on this street?
Not that I know of. Mine is a two-story home.
Yours is a two-story home?
Yeah.
Are most of the homes two-story or one-story?
I'd say maybe 50-50.
Okay.
Two-story, So.
So do you have a particular issue or problem with the height of the house as it is now?
I don't, and maybe because I really don't see it. Mm-hmm. I'm on the side of it. So, but whatever the outcome is, I like this, that it's built by code, whatever those codes are. I know we talked a lot about what the right code is and such.
I have one more question for you, sir.
Sure.
Are you immediate property butter or like a house away?
I'm butt up against it.
You're a property butter?
Yeah.
You're adjacent property?
Adjacent, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, yeah, if you could just give us your name and address, please.
How you doing? I'm Tom Scarano, 54 Lakeway. I'm butted on the other side, the last house on the right.
Okay.
Again, I'd like the thing just to be finished and completed. But
You'd
I
like
want
the
to
property
clear
cleaned up?
Yeah, and the house cleared up. I just want to clear up some facts. I took care of the house for the older lady for years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, at one time, there was a door on that floor. There was stairwell that went up to that floor and a false stairwell that went up to the third floor. They're calling it a third floor, whatever. It just was slanted roof. So basically, they went full 8 foot and then raised the roof a little bit. I don't know how much exactly they raised, but there was always a full staircase with a bathroom and like 2 rooms without a separating wall. It was just open, and there was a bathroom on that 3rd floor. So, I mean, that was, I took care of the house. There's a garage there, She did have a bathroom that they put in there near the boiler room. But as far as, it still really was a basement. So I don't know. But the code with the dirt, that's up to you guys. The other thing is the dirt that they're talking about, it's the wood chips from the trees that they took down, that they were hemlocks. That basically, when you guys trim all along the wires, you destroyed them, they destroyed them anyway. They were old hemlocks. I had a couple on mine too. But, I really don't have a problem with it. If I was to get the house myself, I would have put a full 8-foot room on the top because it was there. So I don't know. Just to clarify some of that stuff. I'm 15 foot off this side of the, 15 to 16 feet right here. I'm the closest. And is that going to be a deck? As long as the codes are like with the setbacks are correct, I don't have a
Yeah,
problem
there's
with.
no setback issues here of any kind before
Because
us.
I'm only like 16 feet from the corner of the house.
Right. Do you have a problem, so it doesn't sound like you have a problem with the height of the house. It seems okay to you?
I really don't.
Okay. Do you feel
mean,
the house is consistent with the neighborhood as far as the height? I mean, are there houses of similar height? I didn't go by this house today, so.
My house sits a little further back, and I'm a little higher, about the same or higher.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Hold on, I want to just go to everybody else first, please. Sure. Is there anybody else here who yes, if you could, once again, ma'am, just give us your name and address.
Yes, Carol Curran. I live at 82 Entrance Way. So I am not directly next to this house. However, there's a house in foreclosure that abuts up to my property, the back of my property. My concern is precedent. If this happens with this house, I can assure you that whoever buys this foreclosure house is going to do exactly the same thing. And I do have a problem with the height of this house. If you go up Entranceway East past my house and you look down, it looks like an apartment building from up there. So I just wanted to make it clear that this will be a precedent and it will not be in keeping with the character of Lake Purdy's. I've lived there for almost 40 years now. I have a 4-bedroom house on a really nice piece of property. Try to maintain it the way it needs to be maintained, but my house is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. So I just wanted to.
One thing I want to mention also, let's say we do grant a variance. I'm not saying we're going to, but if we do grant a variance, that's for this property. Any other property would have to come before us. So making a decision here regarding a variance doesn't apply to everybody in the neighborhood. Just be aware of that.
Yes, but it does sets a precedent, it sets a standard.
I'm just making mention of that.
It does.
I would say that she has the nicest gardens in Purdy's.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, wait, please let me finish with everybody else first. Is there anybody else here who wishes to speak in regard to this application?
I just have one more thing to say.
Okay, please come up. Also, I ask everybody, try not to be repetitive. If you've already said it, we've heard it, but,
I just wanted to clarify the dirt. It will have to be brought in.
You think soil will have to be brought in?
That's wood chips that are there. That's not dirt.
Okay.
So if it's got to be checked or whatever, that has to be done, It has to be, if it's going to be done, it has to be done right.
Right, clean fill would have to be done right. Wood chips obviously are not soil.
Right.
Wood chips are wood chips, okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else here new who would like to speak in regard to this application? Okay, ma'am, please come up, yep. Just give us your name one more time, just for the record, so we have it.
Mayra Harisny, 51 Lakeway. I just had a lot of photos of Lake Purdy's houses so that you can see the character of some of the houses, and Carol's house is in here too.
Well, we have a board member who lives in the neighborhood, and
I'm right up the hill.
And so I'm gonna I'm gonna actually ask, and I think, Tom, you said you drove by this house today, so okay. All right, thank you. Okay, does anybody else from the public wish to speak in regard to this application? Okay. Does the board want to have any discussion? I mean, Bart, what is your opinion of the house? I mean, if you've driven by it, and Tom?
I have driven by it, I walked by it. It's pretty close to the way we walk, and it's just downhill from me. It's an eyesore as it sits. It's not what I would think an elegant, like the base isn't big enough for the height in terms of architectural proportions, but that's not what's before us. And the life safety issues, the plans are the plans, and they've been reviewed. Also not before us. The only thing before us is the code interpretation and or a variance. And as for the code interpretation, I think this is what we do for new construction. I don't see any difference. I would say very clearly that I would interpret the code that he has the right to go up to change his grade without.
From the finished grade?
From where he is today to where it makes it legal.
That's your interpretation?
That's my interpretation, and that's what I've advised clients to do in other municipalities.
Yeah. Tom, you drove by this today?
I drove by today, and so it's tall. It's clearly a big house. It's tall, and not only because of the height of it, but it sits up from the road. And now it's got, so it's imposing,
It sits a little bit on a mound
when
in
you
the
look
property, yeah.
when you look up at it.
Right.
And just another random comment. Everybody wants it done,
100%.
clearly, but we should not let that influence a decision just to get it done. We should make the right decision.
We want it done right.
Yeah. And I did notice that, the tree, you could clearly, it's a mess, right? You can clearly see that all the trees were kind of cut down in the front when you drive by. It's not pretty, and it is a bit imposing from the street. It doesn't, when you look at this picture, you don't really see any of that first level because of the grade up. But keep in mind, there's a whole nother story there.
Right.
And you want to keep going, or can I ask a question?
Yeah, no, go right ahead. No, go right ahead.
So, Tom, if now that we all understand the grade, maybe there was confusion in the original plans, and there was some thinking that was the current grade. If someone wanted to change the grade, right, with 100 cubic yards of dirt, is that need to be permitted separately? Can that even be done?
That would be referred to planning and engineering before a building permit would be issued.
I thought of less than 100 yards, you don't even need a building permit.
It's 50 yards
50
or
yards?
disturbance of 5,000 square feet or greater.
Okay.
So, could that even proceed?
It would depend the outcome of the review of the planning and engineering department. If they saw that they would change the contour of the land so much so that it was impacting a neighboring property or another environmentally sensitive land as far as the steep slope or wetland, and they required it to go to planning board, then the applicant would have the choice of making an application to the planning board versus an administrative review from our planning and engineering department, and or change their application up so they don't have to do so.
Okay. Second part of that question, now that we understand the true grade, right, is the basement a story?
Yes. Yep, it's a 3-story building.
So this now makes it a 3-story building, which is also
as it sits now.
which is also not allowed.
Correct.
By
Yeah,
back,
you've got 2.5 stories in the.
Okay, so there's two items there that are problems that are not part of this application specifically.
Well, one, I think, because if they look to fill the grade, they're looking for it not to be a story. But as it sits unfilled, it is a story.
So at the proposed grade, I know there's 5 foot from the ceiling on
Be
average.
considered a basement.
Do you agree with that? So so if they brought in this 100 yards of fill, it would become a basement
It'd be a 2-story house.
with a 2-story house.
Because you wouldn't see that full third story there, yeah.
Right.
Okay. I mean, Tommy, what solution, either we grant the variance or they rip off the top level. Is there another solution that I'm not seeing here, or?
With interpretation.
Yeah, with interpretation or whatever. right? I mean, that's where we're at.
That's the three things.
That's where we're at.
Mhm.
Okay. Or interpretation, or, right. Okay.
Or I think.
Or a
there's
height variance, then, you know, if it's still considered a three-story house, then they're sprinklering the building according to New York State code, and
There's other issues.
some other things kick in, yeah.
But Tommy, wouldn't you agree that there would be a fourth thing, which would be they could go to planning board?
For a site plan?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah, the
surprised.
planning board's gonna send them back here anyway for a height variance.
They probably want
No,
a
I'm
height variance done
But
first
not-
before they'll do planning,
why
right?
would- If planning board doesn't send, if they show their proposed grades, why would planning board doesn't send us everybody when they show a new grade?
The,
Why would this be?
if my interpretation was overturned by the board, and the grade was permitted to be raised, they're gonna, before their permit gets reinstated, they're gonna go to planning and engineering department. Staff there will determine whether it's gonna be handled administratively or it's gonna go to the planning board.
So they still gotta go to planning, well, they may, they may or may not.
Administrative through they're getting involved with the planning and engineering department. If the grading, the proposed grading is to move forward.
Okay, so one way or another, that's still under further review.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless we just grant a height variance.
Well, if we grant a height variance, they still gotta bring in the soil and still gotta grade and everything else, right? Wouldn't it still be subject to review?
Well, they're gonna have a three-story issue.
They
Yeah,
gotta
so
address,
you're
they gotta
right,
address, they
you're
gotta
right.
address the state codes.
Yep.
But in answer to my original question, where is the dirt coming from? You said it was coming from the property, and apparently it's not coming from the property. It's going to be imported to the
At
property.
least some of it is, that's what it seems like.
And
This
in
has
my,
morphed a
in
little bit,
in
yes.
my eyes, that makes a tremendous difference.
It-
If
like-
what you're pointing to is a couple of piles of chipped wood, which surprised me for even being left behind when you took the trees down, then you're overlooking the whole idea. My question as to where the dirt was coming from was meaningful to me anyway. If you're importing dirt to raise the level of the house, that's a way around the zoning board. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get around the zoning code by importing 100 square cubic yards of dirt. And you know, I would personally be against that.
Because I will say that I did go for, a ride past the house earlier today. And, I would personally like to have everyone here on the board to go to a site walk and take a look at it to see what exactly is going on. I have it, at this present time, I'm on the fence of which way I want to vote at this present time. If this board decided to vote tonight, I would have to deny it because I have very mixed feelings about it. I do have a problem with the measurement off the foundation to start off with. I have a problem with that big time. I would like to see this project go forward because it is an eyesore to the neighborhood. Regarding the trees being cut down, if they're topped off by utilities company, that's a bigger eyesore too. Well, what they did, chances are that nothing's been landscaped, so we're going to have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to do nice landscaping. That's not part of what's proposed to us. The height requirement, I have a big problem with that. I realize the builder put in a lot of time and a lot of money. If it is the facts that the architect screwed up, did not give all of the site levels or a solid blueprints to our building inspector, what do you do here? Where is the fault fall on? It's not Tommy, he's doing his job. It comes down to the architect who presented the plans to the town. Again, at this time, I have, very mixed feelings about it. I wish, I'd like to see everyone do a site walk versus just actually walking on the property, all four corners, versus walking along the side of the road. And I do have a problem with fill being brought in too. Who does the inspection if we allow that to be, take place for the height variance? That's basically what I have to say at this time.
There's a house at 4 houses away where they brought in 3 feet of fill, that wood chips, I mean. The whole yard, halfway down Buenta Way, 3-4 houses away. That whole thing's been sitting there for a year and a half. That's not a problem for anyone, as far as I know. Well, I assume you haven't been called on it.
You said the fill was chips?
There's
Wood chips?
They brought maybe 15 or 18 full trucks of wood chips. The whole yard's raised up, just down the street, and we're talking about one pile of wood chips, which is from cutting trees on the property. Like, it's literally 3 feet.
But I don't think that would qualify as ground.
No.
No, but that's
wood
not,
chips.
well, you're right. There's a distinction. I'm just saying that it's.
Yeah, big tree fell down and on top of the roof of the house and ruined it and cut it.
Okay, I'm not sure wood chips are really the issue here, quite honestly. So, I think we're going far afield from it. Okay, so, sir, I'll let you make some comments in regard to what you've heard and your response to the neighbors and.
I have a lot to say in response to the neighbors across the street, but frankly, they're all not relevant issues, so I don't know that I want to spend time on them. As to the trees, there were many dead hemlocks that were cut down. Some trees had to be removed for the septic upgrade, according to the approved plan by the Board of Health. So some trees were taken down. Most of them were dead. Some of them, the live trees, had to come down because of the septic improvements, as per Health Department. Whether this is a 3-story or 2.5-story is really not before this board. If the neighbors across the street feel it's a 3-story, they should have appealed Tom's October ruling to your board, but that time clock has run out. The only issue before this board is the height issue from finished grade or the pre-construction, pre-renovation grade. The architect has assured Juan and Anthony that there's ample soils behind the building. There's behind the house, the area rises up, and the architect has assured them that they do not have to import. But if they do have to import some fill, we'll be sure that it'll be clean fill and documented its point of origin. I don't believe it's your job as the zoning board to force a site plan review or send us to the planning board or planning department if it's not otherwise required. And in terms of the appearance of it, you're not an architectural review board. You're a zoning board, and you're here to interpret your zoning code. You're not here to make aesthetic findings about whether the design is desirable. But the neighbors abutting on both sides don't have a problem with the height. There's a colonial on one side. When it's finished and clapboarded and roofed and the windows are in, it's going to be quite lovely, and it's going to be a huge improvement. And it'll be in the general colonial style, in keeping with the character. The area is going to be well landscaped. We can do some screening for the neighbors across the street. And so that's our position is that the benefit of the doubt has to go to my client as the property owner, and I think there's clearly some uncertainty in the Somers Code as to where do you measure from for renovations versus where do you measure from for new construction, and I think that benefit of the doubt has to go to my clients, and we would ask for that interpretation.
Did I hear you say there might be an offer for some screening for the neighbors if
Absolutely.
would possibly somewhat mitigate? Okay, I'm just
Yes,
I'm just,
yes. And in
I
terms
just
of
want to
the-
know if that's an option.
Absolutely, we're willing to work with them, because the cost to rip off this roof and rebuild it and the time involved is a big factor, money factor. We're happy to spend money on screening. In terms of a sidewalk, ordinarily I wouldn't have a problem, but it's a time factor. It's going to delay us another month. The eyesore is going to continue another month, and frankly, it's kind of a pure legal issue, not really the kind of issue that generally you would need a sidewalk on, but that's up to a majority of the board. We would hope that the board would vote tonight on our request for an interpretation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Tom, is what before us, is there an interpretation before us and also a variance request? If the interpretation, right? I mean, both items are before us at this.
Yes.
Right, at this, both have been documented and noticed.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? At this point in time, no?
Tom, how many points, I think, I'm going to answer my own question, but how many points does it take for a variance to be approved for a height requirement? Is it from, say, for instance, the entry to the garage in the sense of the height requirement? Or is it from the front entry door, the back deck? Or how, does it have to be measured in like 3 or 4 places or just one?
It's average grade, the entire perimeter of the building.
Okay.
In this case, it's quite complicated.
I was going to say,
It goes
that's
all
a
over.
complicated
There were a lot of attempts
mathematical
in
formula.
trying to, reach a point where, it would meet the requirements.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me just make one mention here. Paul, can you put the numbers back up? Should somebody be watching us online, you can call in, and we can bring you on screen, or just your voice up if you have any questions. So for those who can't make it to the public hearing at the townhouse, you're still entitled to call in and have any comments. So we'll leave those numbers up on the screen. All you have to do is call one of the numbers on the screen, and then just put in the Zoom meeting ID number, and you'll come on with us. And Paul, just let me know if anybody logs on. We'll leave it up for a couple of minutes.
So, Tom, if I could just to understand the interpretation and just clearly, the building permit was issued, whether it was a misrepresentation, a miscommunication, a misunderstanding about the grade. But based on the grade shown on those plans, the building permit was issued. When it was discovered that that was not the actual grade, the work was stopped.
Correct.
Because it's your interpretation that you can't just fill to raise your requirement, your height, to change your height requirements. And you disagree with that?
Otherwise, you're building a 3-story building and then converting it into a 2.5-story building by raising the grade.
Right.
Clearly you can, because it's done in new construction.
We're not talking, but this is not new construction, right?
But it's, the zoning code is the zoning code. So it's his interpretation, and he's creating a difference between new construction and renovation. And I'm saying the code is the code, because clearly they do it on almost every new house that's built.
But if a new construction issued plans, and then
It's the same
that didn't represent, that weren't representative of the actual grade, and then it was discovered that they were going, that was their intention, was to raise it to that grade, that would also be a problem. So this is, you understand, there was an expectation of current grade, but was shown what was future, was completed grade after the construction. So that, it's an unfortunate miscommunication, but this would not, a building permit would not have been issued had Tom understood at the time the current grade.
Based upon his interpretation. And this applicant is asking us to not follow his interpretation. He's asking us to follow the interpretation which Tommy uses on new construction, but not on renovations. And there's a distinction he's making as between those two things, and I see no distinction in the code. And so, and I understand why he's making that distinction, and he's saying that's the intent, but it's clearly not spelled out, and so the tie goes to the runner. There is ambiguity here. Every single time the applicant has to have that. So and nobody's been able to point to any section of the code which says that this should be discerned because they're not going to planning board. We don't have that process in place.
Had there been a better understanding of the current grade, you would have deemed it a 3-story and not issued a building permit, I would imagine.
Correct.
And had they asked to increase the grade with fill, you would have said, well, that's possible, but you'd have to go before planning.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's
No,
not-
he didn't.
That's how
say
things should have
plan.
gone.
You mean they would have to go to the zoning board?
No, planning and engineering department.
But you didn't
Anytime you're
recommend
doing
that.
any grading, if you're installing an in-ground swimming pool, you have a review through planning and engineering department, and typically an erosion, at a minimum, a sediment and erosion control permit is issued in conjunction with the building permit for the construction of that in-ground swimming pool.
And the approval they mentioned from engineering is not that same process?
No.
But the town.
That they mentioned?
Yeah.
I don't know of an approval from planning and engineering.
No, he's saying they mentioned the engineering.
Approved
Review.
that the
town engineer.
first story could hold the dirt.
Before the permit's reissued with a regrading plan, there's going to be a referral. I'm going to refer the applicant to the planning and engineering department.
So based on, what's the status of the building permit now? Expired or?
It's halted.
It's halted.
Pending, right?
The
It's there.
stop work put a stay on it, and until the
Could you issue, based on what we all have learned tonight, let's assume that we agreed with the applicant on the interpretation. Would you reissue that building permit based
Yeah.
on what we know now?
after I got a response back from planning and engineering department to see if any permits are required of them
For the fill?
for the grading plan. Yeah.
Tommy, if this was a virgin lot and they wanted to place the house just in that spot, would the house,
There would have.
do you think they would have put the first floor or the basement lower? Or would they have brought in fill to go around? Would it be about the same height?
If you're asking for a personal opinion of that, I think they would have built the house lower.
Assuming there's
They
no
would
rock.
have, they would have somehow, they would have graded it down, right?
Grade also, and you
Right.
may be getting into.
They would have dug.
We're on a rock hill. I mean, so.
If doable, I've seen rocks blasted, I've seen rocks hammered, I've seen mountains moved, and
You go in my
everything's
basement,
doable.
It's nothing but rock.
There's rock all over the place around here. Okay, I'm just, Okay. Now, of course, if we don't go with the revised interpretation, the applicant also has a 5-foot height variance before us, so we would have then that as a alternate decision to make.
I actually have more issue with that than I do with the interpretation.
I'm just saying, yes.
But
The 5-foot variance may be a bigger issue, yes. Okay, so, any more comments from the board? Any more discussion?
I'm good.
Been an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't understand the argument you're making for the interpretation. That I haven't gotten over it. It would appear to me that Tommy's interpretation makes sense. So I'm not understanding your argument that it doesn't.
So why, the interpretation is natural grade versus finished grade. And Tommy's interpretation is natural grade and finished grade change based upon whether it's renovation or new construction. And I'm saying those terms do not change.
I mean, one
Except-
argument I can make with Bart is that, you know, a new home constructed, the grade is never gonna be the same as it originally was.
Well, that's the
And that's your point, right.
That's the point. And so,
Right.
and I understand there's a process, but he's also saying under this circumstances, he's gonna refer to planning and engineering, and they'll either decide it's a minor change and not make him go through the process, or they'll make him go through the process.
I disagree. I think here we had a finished grade, and in doing the construction, we're now calling the existing finished grade is now the natural grade because we want to come in and we want to bring fill and we want to increase the height, and calling the new fill the finished grade. We've always had two finished grades, and we don't have a natural because we don't have something pre-construction. So I think I agree with Tom's interpretation.
It's a much better way of putting it.
She's better at that, Tom.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
They're making they're modifying the finished grade in effect to get to where they want to be.
There already is the finish.
There already
And there already is a finished grade there.
And we're just conflating the issue of calling it a natural grade.
But you
We
make
don't
it,
have a natural grade.
you put a proposed, like on every plan, you put a proposed grade, and that becomes the finished grade once it's complete.
And if that had been on the plans and that had been submitted, there would have been a different process and it wouldn't have gone the way that it did.
But I think if that hadn't happened, you would have referred them to planning.
Right.
Sure.
And
It looks to me like that, frankly, that was an oversight.
I would say. we
I
can
think
go
they should
round
have been
and
sent
round
to
and
planning
have-
before.
The plans were not accurate.
The original proposal was for a second-story addition, period.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, I think we can go round and round and we can certainly agree to disagree, but I would just be inclined to vote.
Okay.
So are we taking one vote and then discussing the variance? Are we taking a vote on the interpretation?
Well, I guess we have to first
Vote on
make
the
an interpretation. So, I don't know, I mean, I'm kind of caught in between on this one also. I think I'm almost siding more with Bart on this one, even though I don't like modifying the grade to get it to where you want to be. I certainly see why Tommy rejected this and put it before us. I don't know, what do you think, Arnie, Bill?
Like I said,
Looking for enlightenment here.
you know, out of the, okay, granted, to build a house costs a lot of money. Out of the two omens that we will be dealing with, the one that's in front of us now, versus a 5-foot variance on a roof line, I personally would rather see the grade changed to accommodate 2.5 stories. That's where I'm at.
I mean, if we deny the applicant on both of these things, they've got no choice but
To tear it down.
to tear the top off, tear the second story off. I mean, it's a pretty, I mean, yeah,
It's a very costly,
it's a costly endeavor. You know, if they're willing to provide screening, I mean, I don't like that we're put in this position because we had, you know, the building department wasn't given proper plans.
right.
You know, and here we are now stuck with something that's built. You know, I remember there was one instance where there was an error on a site plan where someone had built a house 1 foot within the setback. I mean, we theoretically could have told them to tear the back of the house off. You know, we didn't because of the cost, but, you know, we don't like to see these type of screw-ups, obviously. You know, these type of mistakes, you know, we don't have to approve this, you know, but, you know, we're put in a bad position now, so. I don't know, Bill, what's your feeling on this?
Well, I'm kind of stuck the way Arnie is. I understand how Tommy got to his conclusion. However, I just don't agree with it. But if you're going to talk about a 5-foot variance for height, I have a lot more problems with that than I have with arguing over the interpretation of some words.
That's right.
And keep in mind, if we did approve a 5-foot variance, not saying we're going to, and not saying I would agree to it, that doesn't mean every house in the neighborhood is getting a 5-foot height variance,
That's
obviously.
true.
No, of course not.
This is on a one-time deal, because that's not something we're gonna do.
But the issue is that this house doesn't have the characteristics which lend itself towards the variance. In other words, it's on a rise, and you can see, it's on a smaller foundation. All the mitigatory things you would have, which we would say, if the additional height doesn't matter, don't exist on this property. So
It's all exacerbated by the property.
by
Yes,
this particular
absolutely.
house. It doesn't look right. And obviously, that's not before us. And I feel very strongly about the interpretation because in my practice, I've appeared before some 70 municipal boards, at least. And this is what I see all the time, is that people raise the grade on renovations and on new constructions. And so that's what I'm used to seeing.
On second-story additions, you find it common that the grade is raised?
I don't see any.
I would imagine that would be pretty uncommon.
I don't see any difference ever made in between renovation and new construction. And so
But what you see you're saying...
all the different applications I see before planning boards and zoning boards, they say you can put dirt in and that becomes your grade. That's what I see. And I've never seen this distinction before. And we clearly say that on new construction because it has the benefit of planning.
Well, it's clear that the benefit of planning was overlooked by us or was overlooked by the submitter as a way of getting around the zoning code. Code, frankly.
The guy, somebody made a mistake. And
I don't know that it was intentional. I think it was.
No, I don't know whether it was intentional or unintentional.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think-
really care.
It's
It's an error, though.
it was
It's a
certainly an error.
mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's hard to discern the reasoning, but it certainly has caused them a bit of an expense to get to this point.
To say nothing, yes.
So I would make a motion to have a different interpretation, or say that the interpretation for height should be from finished grade.
So even if they add soil, that's the new.
That's the new finished
That's
grade.
the finished grade. So yeah. So if we're prepared to vote on this, we'll go for a type 2 action first, and then I'll take the motion.
I think
Keep in
that's a
mind.
confusing way to put the motion.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
All right,
We'll get back to that.
You want to clarify?
I do want to make one more mention too. For a yay or nay, you need 4 votes. We're a 7-person board, so 4 votes one way or another have to go for a decision to be made here. Okay, so does the board want to have more discussion on this, or do we want to go to a vote? We could carry it over to the next meeting if you feel a site visit is necessary. I don't know that it's necessary, but, because I don't know that that's going to change the interpretation issue.
It shouldn't.
So, whether we aesthetically like it or not, I'm not really sure that that's the issue, because it does look kind of tall and things, but, that's not really the issue before us.
Because one of the things is because it's on a hill, too.
Right, it happens to be on a hill, and it's tall, so, it's right. As Bart pointed out, the situation is exasperated by this, by its location. But any further comments, or are we going to go to a vote on the interpretation?
I'll go for a vote.
Maybe we could take time and talk to town council about this. We could further look at the code.
I think we should take a vote. The question is, what's the
I'll go for a
most
vote.
elegant way to phrase it?
Okay, well, let's do this. First, okay, can I have a motion as to the type of action? Let's do that first.
I'll make a motion type 2.
Second.
Ms. DiToledo?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harding?
Aye.
Mr. Lansky?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye. Okay, so,
Thank you.
I think what we're going to do now is entertain a motion for an interpretation under the code, And I guess it's whether it's,
Do
the
you want
height is going to be from finished ground or,
Can I read you this and can we see if that fits, if anyone likes that? A determination that the 29'6" height of appellant's home as measured from the mean level of the finished grade of the ground immediately adjacent to the dwelling complies with the 30-foot maximum height allowed. It's narrower than you just saying finished grade.
Well, or should the motion simply deal with whether or not
this is an interpretation.
the application is to overrule the interpretation of the building inspector?
But we have to replace it. We have to edify what we're.
I don't know if we do.
We do. I think we're just making
I don't think
a
we have to
decision
do
of
that.
whether we are upholding or not Tom's interpretation. That's what's before us. Do we agree with Tom or do we not?
I don't know. What do you
It's a
want to-
generic decision,
what
not really applicable to this applicant in effect. Well,
I think, this applicant is who's in front of us.
Right. So in this
so he's-
application, we
and
either
he's-
agree with Tom or we don't.
And this is what he's asking for. Specifically, a determination that the 29'6" height of appellant's home, as measured from the mean level of the finished grade of the ground immediately adjacent to the dwelling, complies with the 30-foot maximum height allowed for dwellings in this R10 zoning district.
Then that eliminates the second step.
So that's the whole, that's what he's asking for, and I'd like to, unless someone has an alternative
What
idea.
about number one?
What about number one?
I mean, you can't pick and choose.
I'm just trying not to create a second step, because if we simply say that we disagree with the building inspector, then how does the applicant proceed with that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I'll be
sure,
very
I'll
brief.
take your input, sure.
Yeah. Under New York State law, your zoning board, like every zoning board across the state of New York, has the step into the shoes of the building inspector in this situation. And you are now making a decision and interpretation.
Of the code.
Of the code.
Yes.
And so you just can't say we disagree with the building inspector. My clients need a definitive ruling, and your building inspector needs a definitive ruling from you. So you are now the super building inspector of the town of Somers, and we need you to speak and speak clearly.
That the height will be determined from,
Based on
we're either going to say
Paragraph
finished grade,
two.
finished grade.
finished grade to the peak, the average, right?
Finished grade, which is vaguely defined in our code. So we're gonna make a motion on something that this whole issue was about.
Was it,
It's
Are we
finished
gonna-
grade, it's finished grade with or without fill is the distinction here.
I guess we have to define finished grade.
Because we have a pre-finished grade and now we have an after finished grade. So it's the question of fill, it being allowed to count into the finished grade.
If I may again, your building inspector has found this set of plans dated
September 26th.
September 26th, to conform to the code. So we just need you to rule that whatever the grades are shown, the average grade, and it's a complicated calculation. We had to go back and forth with Tom numerous times, the architect. So whatever these plans show as the average grade, Tom is determined to be conforming to the letter of the law, but not the spirit, in his view. But these are the plans that you should reference in your motion and give a specific ruling that the grades, the final grades, their finished grades shown on this plan are 29.5 feet and therefore conform to the 30-foot height. Thank you.
And, yeah, I don't,
Respectfully disagree.
but there's
Yeah,
no,
I'm
well,
not
there's
sure I
no
get it.
argument that those plans with the fill would qualify in and
Based
of
on your motion.
themselves, but that's not the issue at hand, that's not it's what we're defining as finished grade.
So if I take these together and say, motion for determination that the 29'6" height of appellant's home is measured from the mean level of the finished grade as shown on page 2 of 11 proposed grading plan of the ground immediately adjacent to the dwelling complies with the 30-foot maximum height allowed for dwellings in the R10 zoning district. That would be specific enough for us to vote on it and for them to have something if that vote passes.
Well, that would be specific to them, but aren't we really looking to do that? We are defining exactly how the height of a building is determined, what that 30 feet is. Aren't we really supposed to be making a decision here that this board has determined that the height of a building to meet the 30-foot maximum is based on the final finished grade, the average around the house? I mean, that's what I think we're doing. And then that would then apply to the applicant.
Yes.
And apply.
I think we should be making a generic
And it would
decision.
apply to all other.
As if we were
applications
writing
in the
a
future.
section of the code, I think we should do that. You know, that's what we're interpreting. That's how I look at it.
Fair.
But what is the finished grade?
Well, that's what I think we have to define, that this zoning board is interpreting the finished grade is such.
The final grade.
Yeah, the final grade. We'd have to come up.
Final grade as shown on plans.
We've got to give guidance. And do we feel that's within the spirit of the code, or can it be manipulated? I mean, but is that way houses are built,
Yeah, but then again, though, if I understand everything that's going on here, the architect screwed up.
Right.
Okay? So now we are stuck with trying to solve a problem here. Again, I have very mixed feelings regarding this. But I will say this. Based on the evidence that has been brought to the zoning board, there is a solution to the problem. And I realize this applicant is solely on this piece of property. The next applicant for a variance for the same scenario, we can totally change. I understand that part. Again, the builder put a lot of time and money into this. And it was approved by the town building inspector. And somewhere along the line, the height got overlooked.
Yes, but we have already decided that the way we are going to measure the height is from the finished grade.
Right.
We've decided that now.
Right, no, I understand
that hasn't been voted.
We haven't voted on it.
We haven't
yet.
voted on it yet.
So that's
So that's what's going to be before us. If we decide it's on finished grade means
finished grade.
Finished grade.
I think the question that we have right now is whether we're making an interpretation specific to this applicant, or we're going to make an interpretation broadly for every future applicant.
I think an interpretation is broad. I think that's.
So,
because then if we were only making it for this
That's
applicant,
slightly
that would be a
different
variance. That would be, then we do a height variance for 5 feet.
Yep. I think that's reasonable. And then we put together a motion and take a vote and see what happens.
We'll just have to see how the vote goes, because we don't have the seventh member tonight. So we might.
Yeah,
we could have a tie, or
as worded, it's not clear to me, so I won't cast a vote. Because I don't know what finished grade is.
I mean, maybe that would have to be part of our
Finished
motion
grade,
defining
final
finished
grade,
grade.
et cetera.
But Tom, you never know what the finished grade is until you finish. So it's it's always an unknown until the job is done.
I'm differentiating on a renovation between the existing grade, right? There's a renovation, a second-story renovation.
I'm
if
with
you're
Bart
adding
on
a
that.
second story,
I
to
don't
me-
find any difference. There's no difference. The code doesn't take any difference. The code just says the code. Doesn't say whether it's
Doesn't say-
renovation or new building. And you're all supposed to comply with the same code.
They measure height the same way, no matter what it is.
Right. We are to the point of determining that as far as we're concerned, the finishing code is going to be measured from the finished level of the dirt.
The finished grade,
And
the real
Finished grade.
final finished
And
grade.
the way it's done is, at time of CO. the
That won't
building-
change.
The building department goes out there, and when they do their final walkthrough, among other things, they check
Right.
height and make sure it's okay.
Right.
And, and they measure off of, the mean grade as shown on the plans and what exists out in the world.
Right.
And that's, it's a walkthrough. And that becomes finished grade.
Except that allows for a lot of manipulation in the process.
It does allow for some, but
What was that you said, Melissa? I'm sorry?
I said, except that allows for a lot of manipulation in the process.
There could be some abuse.
It does.
But how much could
Enough
they
dirt, I
abuse?
can do anything.
You just
well,
keep
but you get
changing
into grading
the
it
grade.
and retaining walls, and then you get into planning and other things. And you can only do so much retaining without running into different issues with the code.
Remember, someone could only do a basement in 2 stories. They couldn't go any higher than that, right? I mean, there's no 3rd story allowed.
There's no
so-
third story allowed, and there's also no.
So they could take this filling or adding soil to a degree, but then they would just couldn't do it anymore. They would run out of space.
Right.
Yeah. It's limited. It's not like they could put like 30 feet of soil and bury 3 stories and then put something on top. It wouldn't work.
And you can only do so many feet of retaining without going back through the process.
Yeah. Because you think of the extremes, you know, where could someone take it to the extreme based on our interpretation?
Now, Tom raised a very good point, where maybe we should get some legal advice from counsel?
The only thing is we're going to go out another month. So,
But the legal advice is going to be that you guys should make up your mind.
I think that's what.
Well, that's probably what Jerry would say, yes. You guys are the zoning board, you have to
I
make the
just
interpretation.
saved us $400.
Maybe $800.
You know, I mean, we can make that, we can do that, and then Tom can still interpret finished grade how he chooses, since we haven't defined that any further.
And if they have to grade the property or bring in fill, that could
So
be.
he may still not grant that building permit if he considers the current, what is there now as the finished grade.
I don't know why you do that.
Because it's unclear.
But the ambiguity goes to the applicant in zoning as a matter of course.
So I think if you want to make a motion, Bart, you should go ahead and you should make it in a generic sense, because I think it's make believe the applicant isn't here and we're just doing it, we're just adding to the code as to what our interpretation is of building height based on finished grade, natural grade, and then what finished grade actually is.
Okay.
Will we be adding that to the code?
Well, this is an interpretation. It's not actually going to add to the code, but, you know, but in effect it does. You know, it's an interpretation. We would be consistent in our future
I
interpretations.
mean, I don't know if we want to be adding definitions.
No, I was just going to try to reference. So, a motion that the height of a residence is measured from the mean level of the finished grade of the ground immediately adjacent to the dwelling, to the vertical distance. I'm going off a height of building. Vertical distance from the mean level of the land. No, sorry.
I just feel like we need to make it, we need to answer number 1.
Yeah, but I think we're. So,
Melissa, maybe you could be helpful there.
there's so many. I got Tom's voice in my head. It's messing up my drafting.
I mean, do you have to say much more than it's just from the final finished grade to the average final finished grade around the foundation to the roof line will be?
Height of the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to.
I mean, it may be more simple than we really have to, if that's going to be your motion. Then the rest of us will vote yea or nay.
Is from the mean grade.
I think we all want to see the right thing happen here as well.
We haven't determined what that is, Tom.
Well, that if there's going to be fill, that it be done through a process. You're telling me that process is going to happen anyway at this point, regardless of what we decide.
Yeah,
They're bringing in fill, you know they're bringing in fill, that's going to be a condition of any building permit that you issue.
Correct.
And you'll seek out, Tom, whether they have to go to planning or wherever else has to be done, engineering has to get involved, whatever it may be. Yeah, because there are septic in the front, there's wells, where's this fill coming from?
There's a steep slope in the back and.
Right.
Yeah.
And wood chips are not fill, obviously.
How about this, motion that the height of the building is from the mean final grade adjacent to the building as measured by the building department at the time of final inspection?
I think that covers it. I don't think it has to be.
Yes?
Once that's final, you need to please,
Yeah, email to
email me that. I'm still on the height of the building.
Okay,
Thank you.
of course. So the only thing I did put in there is final grade, because, and measured at the time of final inspection, so that gives, and then at that point in time, if there's some chicanery that all sorts of crazy retaining has been done or something else has been done, the building department's there and we have control in place. So.
Okay, so is that your official?
Yeah, so I'll read that again, and
Yeah.
if there's
Yeah.
any improvements, please tell me. Motion that the height of the building is from the mean final grade adjacent to the building as measured by the building department at time of final inspection.
And how is that different than what exists today? I don't.
Because it's final grade and at the time of final inspection versus either natural grade or finished grade, which can be interpreted prior to or after. So that's hopefully clarifying.
Okay, so that's the motion on the table, so.
Can I just see that?
Art, are you done with your motion?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion on the table. Denise, if you could take the vote.
I need a second.
He needs a second.
Oh, second. Anyone want to second the motion?
I'll second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Nay.
Mr. Gio?
Nay.
Mr. Hardin?
Aye.
Mr. Lansky?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Can I see that? Yeah.
Nay.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
This is really sloppy.
All right, so we're in a situation where we have a 3-3 tie at this point in time. So, no decision. I don't know in an instance like this, if we get a seventh member next month, we re-vote on it. I don't know that I've ever seen this happen.
So applicant would have the option of adjourning this until next month in case we have a.
Well, if we bring in a new member, we would have to start from scratch.
But there's technically 2 more votes,
I
right?
think we also need to make another determination.
Okay, well, right now, we don't have a decision on this, right? I mean, right, we may grant the variance or may not grant the variance. That's the second, right?
Yes, but I think we also need to make a motion about a determination that the building inspector either correctly deny the appellant's application based on the code interpretation that finished grade does not permit an applicant to change or raise the grade level. And we didn't make any determination on that.
That's fair.
But what would we want to do that, or what's the result of that? What happens then?
Well, that's what's in their application. They're asking us to decide if Tom correctly denied their application because his interpretation was that they could not raise the perimeter grade, and that if they did, that did not count as finished grade level.
Isn't that what our previous vote just did?
Didn't we
did,
just
though?
take care of that?
I thought we, right?
In a roundabout way, I think we were.
I mean, in
voting on
effect, I
height
think.
measurement.
Yeah, to me, that was just a random statement about height. It didn't really address this application. So I'd agree with that. I'd second that motion if someone made it.
So let's go, we're here.
Okay.
Let's go through that one.
Okay, now what do we? Because aren't we determining right now how height is measured?
Well, we were trying. I thought we were trying to do it more directly, but this hasn't been addressed, and we can address it in a vote. So rather than going through it, let's make a motion.
Okay. So what's the?
I'll move for determination that the building inspector incorrectly denied appellant's zoning complaint renovation drawings and plans based on his interpretation that is not within the intent of zoning to raise the perimeter grade of a dwelling to make it conforming in height.
I would expect our vote to be the same as it was the previous
I
one.
don't know.
Okay.
Let's find out.
Okay. All right, Denise, do we have a second on that motion?
I guess, hey.
Okay,
I second it.
Arnie seconds it.
Ms. DiPolito?
Nay.
Mr. Gale?
Yes.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Lansky?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Nay.
Chairman Ministro?
Aye. Now, Bill
Okay.
voted differently on that one.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I voted aye.
We voted on the, what? Well, on the,
Someone voted differently.
That was 4-2.
No, Tom voted the same. I mean, on the first round, you voted against.
No, I voted aye.
You voted aye?
Aye.
Yep.
And what did you, you voted nay, Arnie.
Yes.
Yes.
You voted nay.
I voted no.
And
I
then you
voted
voted
aye.
aye this time.
Right.
Oh, I see. So Arnie changed his vote. Okay, I'm sorry.
So you're saying, so just to clarify, the motion read was that
Incorrectly.
Tom was incorrect in his determination.
No, he was correct.
So,
I'm sorry,
so you meant to say no?
No.
What?
It said incorrectly denied.
Incorrectly. All right, so you have to.
Denied.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So,
Where does that leave us? Was there a misunderstanding?
so,
Yeah, because there's so much going on, and I have to say,
okay, so
when
We were discussing
board
it in
members,
the
when,
affirmative.
okay, like when Melissa speaks, okay, I'm hard of hearing. Even though I do wear 2 hearing aids, I find it very, very difficult. So there's times where I pick up stuff, so I may misunderstand, so I apologize for that,
it's okay.
That's
okay?
Yep.
So you're changing the vote?
Yes.
Okay. So
So
we're
we're
at the same
Right
scale. So
back there.
everybody voted consistently with the
Same
first
way.
vote. And the same.
Right back where we started.
Right, so we're,
I don't think there's any sense in going through
No.
number 2.
No.
So,
okay, so we have, so the matter of interpretation is pending at this point in time?
Right.
Right.
Is undetermined, unless we had a 7th member here. I guess the applicant could ask to hold it over to the
let's
next.
see what the applicant has to say.
Yeah.
Given that, let's see what they want, how they want to proceed.
Can you tell me what the status of a 7th member is? Is there somebody that just is absent tonight?
Yeah,
or-
he just happens to be absent tonight.
Oh.
We would expect him at next month's meeting.
Okay, so I would ask for an adjournment. And to get to your point, under New York law, an absent zoning board member doesn't need to rehear everything as long as that member reads the minutes or watches it on video and gets up to speed.
Right.
Feel sorry.
And that's a complete, and then it's a complete revote.
Then we would re-vote on the matter.
Yeah, I think that's,
Because right now, it's, because you need 4, so there's 7 members, you need 4 one way, yea or nay, to get it through. All right, so you're asking for an adjournment, so we're not going to vote on the variance then,
Correct.
all right?
But the adjournment is going to be for a new vote on our original point, part 1. as well.
Yes, that's what I would say.
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you very much.
All right. So, sorry, sorry it's undetermined at this time.
I'll
Okay.
reach out to Paul Padamani.
Okay, thank you, Denise, yeah.
Okay.
And next month, if we're going to revote on this, I certainly want any member who can't make next month's meeting, if that's the case, to let us know, because obviously we're gonna be stuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so. Okay, I'm sorry we couldn't.
I may even, which is something I've never done, but I will send you all the reminder the week before. I'll send you a reminder that day, and anybody who hasn't said to me, yes, I'll be there, I will make phone calls so that we know that we will have full attendance at the meeting on January 17th.
Right, okay, thank you, Denise, that would be very helpful.
You're welcome.
Sir, well, it's, the matter is closed at this point in time, so the matter is adjourned to next month's meeting. Next month's meeting is on January 17th. We're always, usually the third Tuesday of every month. Same.
Yes, the 17th.
Yeah, okay, so,
No.
sir.
Miss-
I'm sorry, go ahead, Denise.
Michael Siriano,
Yes.
if you could just please make sure that you change the date on the sign that's posted on the property, please.
Will do.
Thank you.
And I thank the board, and I wish you happy holidays.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. You too. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who came. So we're gonna just go to one other item. I think everybody had received a draft of the accessory apartment checklist. I believe that Melissa, you had given some comments, and maybe Bill gave some comments on it?
Yes. Correct.
All right. Denise, one other thing that I just thought of as a comment was, one of the things in the code at 170-70B was the principal or accessory building constructed or issued a building permit prior to April 1, 1992. I would just like that as a specific question also. And it's pretty much verbatim 170-70B. Because it's important that if it was issued a building permit after April 1st, 1992, it's technically not allowed in the code unless we grant a variance.
That's the line item 4. When was the building built? So
Let me see.
the
When was-
answer to that question, if it's doesn't.
When was the building?
Yeah, so we could rephrase that a different way.
Could we just put that date in there so I have it triggered when it comes before us? Because I'm always looking, I can never remember that date, April 1st, 1992, so that would be helpful.
Yes, on my computer.
And then Melissa,
I
you had a
printed
comment
out.
also, I forgot what your comment was?
Because I
To add
asked
something
for
to the
I
accessory
wanted to make
apartments?
sure that
I had
they asked
emailed it to
that the
Denise. I can-
septic-
Confirming points of entrance.
Oh, yes.
Of all the
2
questions
points
on
of
there.
entrance and
That's not one of
exit,
them.
which is important for fire.
It's all seen.
Yeah, absolutely, that was a good point. And then Bill, I think, had made the comment just regarding, I think, septic clean out, things like that, what we normally have, so.
Yeah, we got that on
So-
here already, I think.
May I?
I'm going to, Tommy, I didn't share with you the second draft with the updates because I wanted to see what we were going to get tonight. But I was just going to add in that date so that it was a little bit more clear on when it was cleaned. So if everybody, if you want me to just clarify the April 1992 date, is everybody else okay with this? Because
Yes.
we are
Yes.
going to have, we're gonna have an accessory apartment renewal for, a new owner at the next meeting. Ironically, they just got their 7-year renewal like a couple of months ago, and now they sold the house. So they will be on, and then I'll have somebody on for February, and we still have 2 people lingering. We have some unusual situations. Then I'm gonna get into January, sending the renewals for 2023. So, if you're all good with that, Tommy and I will finalize it and we'll use that. That'll be part of your packet for each of those applicants moving forward.
Yeah, but Denise, the thing that runs through my mind is if, for instance, someone fills out this questionnaire and does all the answers right, answers all the questions correctly. What are they coming into us for?
We still have to make a determination.
We have to vote on it.
First of all,
For a vote?
The odds of them filling this out and it being 100% right, number one, is slim to none.
We're gonna have to initiate this by reviewing the file, you know, people, I don't know how big my property is.
Well, Westchester-
What's my survey say? Can you look at it for me? You know, that's what's gonna happen, so that's what we'll end up doing anyway, and I'll be scaling
Yeah.
apartments if there's nothing mentions footage in the resolution of the original approval, so, or on the architectural plans, or on the napkin that the plans were drawn on at the time. So
You
we'll,
can imagine, right, yes.
We'll between Denise and myself and the applicant, we're gonna get a nice accurate
Great.
Yeah.
checklist put
And-
together for the board.
As Tommy says, it'll probably be he and I. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good system of checks and balances. You know, when I became the zoning board secretary 10 years ago, one of the first thing I noticed was it didn't tell you where this apartment was. Is it in the basement? Is it on, you know, is it in another part of the house? Is it in a detached structure? How many bedrooms does it have? I did try to initiate some of that. And Bart, you know, you haven't, I mean, it's a great idea, but you haven't been here long enough to see some of the ones that I've had that I've done.
Okay.
But I think this just is a good system of checks and balances,
Great.
puts everything, and honestly, for me, you know, Tommy and I mean, besides finding plans written on onion paper at the back of a match cover, we have just recently had to pull resolutions that quite frankly weren't worth the paper they were written on because they didn't say anything. So what's the point if it doesn't tell you anything? So this will be much more concise and descriptive, and I think it's a good idea. So thank you, Bart, and thank you all for your comments.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denise.
And
You're welcome.
have a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Celebrates.
Happy New Year.
Oh, you got,
Make
sure you approve the minutes.
Sorry.
Yeah, what minutes do we, now, the minutes I have here,
Yeah, you have minutes, the minutes that have to be approved are from the November 15th meeting. The draft I sent you says September 20th on top, so I apologize.
right, but everything else is, okay, right. That was
Oh,
my,
absolutely.
right.
I made the change on my draft, but it is the November 15th.
right. So,
I got enough, yeah.
okay, so with that one change, I'm just gonna do by voice, all in favor of approval of the November 20th, 2022 minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, no other changes? Okay, good. All right, so our next meeting is scheduled for January 17th, 2023. Please keep your packets from this meeting because this is going to be an issue next month. Denise, will you make sure Paul has the complete packet for this meeting, for this?
Yeah, he has it, and I'm going to email Paul probably before I go to bed so that he knows what's going on.
Okay, and Paul might have to review
You know,
the
he may like to leave
tape
town.
of the minutes. But Paul will be,
Wow, it's 10 o'clock.
yeah, Paul will probably be the deciding factor here.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything further? Any other discussion points, issues? Okay, just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, healthy and Happy New Year, and the best to everybody's family. Take care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good night, all.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you, Denise. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, Paul, we're good. Thank you.